In Jamal Khashoggi's final published piece for the Washington Post, he calls for Arab nations to allow freedom of the press, a freedom for which he apparently died fighting. Last night, the newspaper released an opinion column that he wrote before he went missing. In it, Khashoggi said that part of the problem is Arab nations don't face enough punishment from other countries when they do things like lock up critics or take over newspapers. Those actions, he wrote, no longer carry the consequence of a backlash from the international community. Instead, these actions may trigger condemnation, quickly followed by silence. As a result, Arab governments have been given free rein to continue silencing the media at an increasing rate. The editor of the piece said she received it from Khashoggi's translator and assistant the day after the columnist disappeared. She said she was waiting to publish it, hoping he would come back and be able to work on it with her. The Washington Post editorial page editor and columnist Fred Hiatt joins us now. He oversees the paper's opinion section. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us about the decision to post.
Well, it was both hard and easy, Shepard. Hard because, as you say, it kind of meant admitting to ourselves that Jamal was unlikely to come back and help us edit it, which is something that we haven't wanted to admit. Easy in the sense that it was such an amazing statement of what he believed in, what he'd been fighting for most of his life, why he went into exile, and apparently, if what we're hearing is true, the values that he gave his life for.
Khashoggi was critical of the Saudi king and the crown prince, who's been accused of sending the hit squad to the Turkish consulate. But at the same time, he was a strong advocate for the reforms that the crown prince was publicly advocating.
That's right, and you know, which is why it's been so almost unfathomable that this crime would take place, and why I think a lot of us here at the Post had a hard time believing this could be true. I mean, Jamal was a patriot. He really loved his country. He really believed that the Middle East could have a brighter future, and he really wanted the Crown Prince's reforms to succeed. I think he saw himself as a constructive critic who was saying, if you want to open up the kingdom, if you want to be more than just an oil petro state, you're going to have to rely on the vibrancy of your own people. And to do that, you have to have debate. You have to let them speak. You have to let them exchange opinions. And the kingdom would be a lot stronger if you allowed that. And that was really the message he was delivering. You know, it's why we translated this piece into Arabic and some of his other pieces. He wanted this message to his own people and to the region. And you know, he very much saw it as in the interest of his country.
Self-imposed exile last year. Explain to us why and how it happened that he came to the Post.
He, you know, he didn't want to leave his country. He's been a journalist there for many years, and Saudi Arabia's never been a democracy. Of course, there's always been some restrictions, but in 2016 he began to see that, and then 2017 when the Crown Prince really was tightening his grip, I think Jamal began to see that it was going to be different than it had been before. There was even the limited space that had existed in the past was going away. And he said, you know, I don't want to leave my country, but there are a lot of my countrymen who can't speak up at all. They're in prison or they're muzzled in other ways. And so I have an obligation to speak up. And he went into exile. I think he knew he was taking some risks, although I don't think he could have imagined anything like this any more than the rest of us could, because people at home were less and less able to express opinions.
He wrote, as part of this column that was released last night, that the Arab world, CF1, the Arab world is facing its own version of an Iron Curtain, imposed not by external factors, but through domestic forces vying for power. He said during the Cold War, Radio Free Europe, which grew over the years into critical institution, played an important role in fostering and sustaining the hope and freedom. Arabs need something similar. Is this something he talked about often? Was this part of his message?
He did, and you know, in 2011, when there was the brief Arab Spring, I think he saw, like a lot of people, that Arabs are no different than anybody else. They want the dignity of freedom. They want to be able to express themselves. And until then, there'd been this kind of myth of, oh, the Arab street, they don't want democracy. Of course, everybody wants that dignity. And when the Arab Spring collapsed, he began to think, and especially in the last year, talked to us and others about creating some kind of platform where these voices could be heard, and some way that we could reach people in these countries where their own press is not allowed to speak with a diverse debate.
Fred Hiatt from the Washington Post. The thoughts of all of us here are with you and yours there at the Post. We thank you for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Shepard.